Welcome back to the Fuji Guys channel. My name is Francis. So you've just got yourself a Fujifilm X-E5 and you'd like to know a little bit more about how to operate it, certain features. Well, you're at the right place, so keep on watching. Alright, so first off, let's put in the battery and memory card. So we can open up the battery door and then we can insert our NPW126S battery, just like that. And then we can insert our memory card, just like that. Close the battery door, and then we have our camera on. So one of the first things you might want to do is consider formatting your card. So there's two ways you can do it. So you can go into the menu and then push up, and then go to the user setting and then to format. And then at that point you can press OK. Now make sure you've backed up all your images or files that were on the memory card because they'll be gone forever. And then at this point you can press on OK. The other way you can do it is by pressing on the drive delete button and then pushing down on the rear command dial for about 2 seconds. And that's a shortcut, and then at that point I can go in and press OK to format. And then I'm good to start shooting. Now before I do that, I like to set a couple of things, and that's a matter of preferences. So I would go into the menu and then I like to set my image quality setting to Fine plus RAW. Now you can decide whether you want to shoot JPEGs or HEIF only, or JPEG or HEIF plus RAW, which you can have as fine, so the highest quality, or normal plus RAW, and then again you can choose RAW only. So let's have it to fine plus RAW. RAW recording, now you have uncompressed, which will give you all of the data without any kind of compression. And you also have the lossless compressed option, which will, compress the image in a way that there won't be any image quality loss, but the file size will be reduced. Now, one thing that will be affected is the computer power required to process the file. So when you open it up into Lightroom or Capture One or any RAW developer, if you zoom in to 100%, it might be a little bit slower because the computer has to work a little bit to sort of reorganize all the bits and pieces of that file. So long story short, you have no image quality loss, but a smaller file size. And then lastly, you have compress, which will slightly affect the image quality, but will greatly reduce the file size. So personally, I prefer to put it to lossless compress. Now again, you have the option to choose between JPEG and HEIF. So the high efficiency image format will give you more information for a smaller file size, although it is not as compatible as JPEG. So it is a matter of preferences. Personally, for ease of use on the camera, I leave it to JPEG. Now another thing that I like to set up right away, I go into the wrench icon, and then I go to Save Data Setup, and then I make sure that the frame number is set to renew, not continuous. That way I won't get into a situation where the frame number will be full, so it'll reach the maximum amount of numbers and I will be forced to either change the memory card or format it. So this is one of the first things I always do. Now having continuous is useful for, consistency's sake if you're doing any type of work that requires a certain chronology. But for everyday use, for me anyway, I prefer to have the renew option so that, anytime, it can just start over and then I never run into any issues. Now let's talk menu navigation. Now, of course, you can go in and press on the menu OK button and then use the joystick to navigate between the different pages and different, sections of the menus, different pages. You can just use the joystick. But there's also another way that might be a little bit faster when you get used to it to navigate. So by using the front command dial, I can rotate and then jump full pages. So as you see, it is very quick to go to one place to the other. And then if I use the rear command dial, I can move between single options. And then by pressing on the rear command dial, I can use it as the OK button. So I can navigate to the option I want and then push in, and then that acts as the OK button. Now pushing on the front command dial will do nothing. Now let's talk exposure settings. So on the Fujifilm X-E5, to change your aperture, you will be using the aperture ring on the lens itself. And then let's say you had a lens with no aperture ring on it, you would be using the front command dial to change the aperture, and then you might need to push in on it to toggle between the ISO and the aperture. Now to change the shutter speed, you simply use the shutter speed dial, which is very simple and straightforward, just like that. And then to change my ISO, I can scroll the front command dial, and as you can see, I can go and change the ISO value. Alternatively, you could use the Q menu. So by pushing on the Q button, it will bring up your quick menu, and then you can see you have your ISO that you can tap on and then scroll. Or you could simply hover over it and then use the rear command dial to change the ISO. Now there's a third way that you could change your ISO, and that would be to assign it to a function button to quickly access that. Now we'll get to that a little bit later. Now if you wanted to have the camera be on auto or program mode, you'd simply have to put the shutter speed dial to P, and that would put the camera into P mode, ultimately making it automatic. Now if you wanted some priority settings, it is very simple. So if I set the shutter speed to A and then I choose my aperture, I am now in aperture priority, and then you can see it with the little A here indicating that I am in aperture priority. Now if I want it to be in shutter speed priority, meaning I will choose my shutter speed and then the aperture will be decided based off of that, I can set the lens to A and then have my shutter speed dial set to a certain number, and then you can see the little S here indicating that I'm in shutter priority. Now in those priority modes or even the auto mode, I can use the exposure compensation dial right here to over or underexpose my image, and then I can do so on a dial to plus or minus 3, or I can go to C, and then at that point I can go up to 5 or down to 5. Now if you wanted a more traditional way, DSLR-like way of operating the camera and changing your exposure settings, you could do so. So if you wanted to change your shutter speed using the rear command dial, you could turn the shutter speed dial to T, right? And then by using the rear command dial, I can now navigate through all of the shutter speed by scrolling with the rear command dial. And then if I wanted to change my aperture using the front command dial, I would have to set the lens to A. But first I need to go into the menu, into the wrench icon, and then to the button and dial setting, and then go down to aperture ring setting A, and then change it from auto to command. And then at that point, using the front command dial, I can change my aperture. Now I can push in onto the front command dial, and then at that point I am now changing my ISO. Alright, so let's talk about autofocus. So if you want to change to autofocusing mode, you can do so on the side of the camera. So we have this switch here. We have S, which is single, C for continuous, and then M for manual. Now you can set it accordingly based off of what you want to do. Now personally, most of the time I use it on the AFS single, right? Autofocus. So when you focus, it locks in and it stays there. If you set it to continuous, it will constantly and continuously focus on your subject, so it will track it in some way. So if you have that AF box set to your subject and it's moving towards you, it'll constantly focus and refocus to make sure that the subject is in focus. Now we can look at a couple of things in terms of autofocusing. So if we go into the menu and then go to the AFMF menu, first of all, we have our focus area, but we can access that quickly by simply moving around the joystick. Now, saying that, now that we have the focusing box moving around, you can see that it's highlighted in green, and then by using the rear command dial, I can change the size of that AF box. So I can make it very small or bigger. Now, that's for single point. Now, if I go back into the menu, I can go and choose my AF mode. So we have single point, which is what we just looked at now. We have zone. So that'll give me, you know, a zone within there, and it will choose and focus within that zone. So you can see that it's picking up subject within that zone. And then same thing again, if I press on the joystick, I can go and make the zone bigger or smaller. We have wide tracking. So this will allow me to track a subject. So whilst being in autofocus continuous, right, I have an AF box right here. That will be my initial starting point to aim at my subject that I want to track. So let's use my ring, for example, and then I'm going to half press to focus, and then you can see it's tracking my ring. So this is wide tracking. And then lastly, we have all, which will allow me to circle through all of the modes. So if I press on the joystick, now I'm in zone, and then I keep going bigger, then it's going to keep going, and then I get into wide tracking, and then I go to single point, and then I get back into zone. Now, speaking of zone, we do have the zone custom settings. So I have 3 different positions of zones that I can customize. So I can make it, you know, wider or taller, and that can be suiting for different scenarios. So we can have it like this. We can have it very tall and very slim, or, you know, we can have it very wide and, again, very slim. So we can play around, and then we have 3 slots that we can customize, and then these will show up when we navigate through our various, you know, sizes of zone areas, if you would. Now, if we go into AF mode all settings, so that will be actually to edit, you know, the last point we talked about. So we can choose when we're in AFS or AFC, the ones that show up. So we can skip some of those that we might not want to use, right? So the single point, all of the size. So if we know we never want, you know, the smallest and then the biggest, and then let's say this one, and then zones, actually, I only want the 3x3. I don't want, you know, the other ones, neither the customs, and then I don't want the wide tracking. So the ones that I customized was for AFC, right? So if I go in and then press on the joystick, and then I go through all the ones that I can select. So, you know, I keep going, and then you can see the zone, as mentioned before, there's only one, and there is no wide tracking either. Now for AFC, we have, you know, a couple of different behaviors that we can select in order to track. So first one is going to be your presets, right? So multi-purpose is going to be the first one. We have one that's made to ignore obstacles and continue to track your subject. We have accelerating and decelerating. We have suddenly appearing subjects, and then we have the movement that's kind of erratic, so kind of all over the place. And then lastly, you can go in and dial in, you know, your own AFC custom settings. Now, personally, most of the time, multi-purpose is doing great for me, but depending on what you do, you might want to go in and then tweak in those specific settings. And then last thing I want to talk about is the face and eye detection and subject detection. So face and eye detection, we can turn it on, and then we have a couple of options. We can select to have the eyes off so that only the face, in general, is being tracked. We have eye auto, so it will select, the eye which is closest to the lens, so it will jump between the two. Now, my personal favorite is going to be the right eye priority, so it will, keep the right eye in focus no matter how far or close it is from the lens. And then we have the same option for the left eye. So we can turn it on or turn it off. For now, we're going to set it to off. And then we have the subject detection as well. That's possible to have if we want to track specific things like animals, birds, automobiles, motorcycles and bikes, airplanes, train, and then we can also track insects and drones as well. So for tracking insects, we're going to be using birds, and then for drones, we're going to be using airplane. And then for now, we're going to set it to off. Now, the Fujifilm X-E5 features a new classic display mode, which is very neat, clean, and reminiscent of, older film cameras. And to enable it, it's very simple. You simply have to bring up the camera to your eye and then push on the display back button to toggle between the various display options. And then you will see that you have this new classic display mode, which again is very neat. The little orange red numbers at the bottom, and then the light meter needle on the right side is just looking amazing. And then as you can see on the screen now, I'm putting some example because it is not possible to see it through the LCD screen, which is also a very neat thing, which makes the experience even more authentic. You need to be looking through the EVF to see that new classic display mode. So again, simply press on the display back button while having the camera to your eye, and then you'll be able to toggle between the different view modes and then eventually get to this new classic display mode. So the Fujifilm X-E5 features the X-Trans 5 HR sensor, so the 40 megapixel sensor, which allows us to do great things like digital zoom. So we have the option to have 1.4 and then 2 times zoom, and it is very easy to enable it. So we have this small lever at the front of the camera, which is very reminiscent of the X100 series, and then I'm very glad to see it on the X-E5 because it adds a lot of function, and we'll talk about that later. But if I push on to that lever, you can see I am now, I focused by mistake. I am now at the 1.4 times zoom, and then if I push again, I'm at the 2 times zoom. Now, right now, as it stands, you don't see much because I'm aiming at this table, but there's also something else that we can do that now is reminiscent of the GFX 100 RF. So if I pull on that lever at the front, I can toggle between the different surround view option. So now you can see that I'm zoomed in at 2 times, and then I have this gray frame that kind of allows me to see outside of the frame of the zoom. So again, if I go back to normal and then I zoom to 1.4 times and then I zoom to 2 times. Now, if I pull again quickly on that lever, I have the frame lines option. So again, just to give you an idea, I'm back to normal, 1.4 times, and then 2 times. So this is a very neat feature, and then you still retain a lot of image quality even if you zoom in to 1.4 or 2 times. So that can give you that little extra reach that you might be looking for when you're out shooting, and then you have the ability to have it right in camera rather than do it later in post and just crop it in. You can frame it with that additional reach, which is a very neat feature. All right, so like all Fujifilm cameras, the Fujifilm X-E5 is highly customizable. So we have a lot of customizable buttons on this camera, and then we can assign our favorite or most used features to have them quickly accessible. And then the way we go about customizing them is simply pressing on the display back button for 1 or 2 seconds, and then you'll see a diagram of the camera will pop up. And then by going down to the various function buttons, we can see them highlighted in green to clearly see which button we're talking about. And then if we look, for example, at that new lever at the front, it is quite handy because we have technically 5 different function buttons, if you would, on that lever. So inside the lever itself is actually a function button. So here you can push on it and then toggle a feature. So for now, this is the view mode by default, but I could go in and change it to do something else. So I could decide whether I want to preview the exposure and white balance in manual mode. I could make it bring the histogram up for me. So let's just do that. And then now when I push on to that button at the front, you can see I have my histogram pop up, and then I click again and it goes away. Now going back in there, simply pressing on the display back button again for about 2 seconds. As you can see, let's talk about that lever a little bit more because it can do so much, right? So if I pull quickly on it, it's going to change the surround view option like I mentioned before. If I long pull on it, then it's going to bring up the aspect ratios. If I push on it quickly, it's going to enable the digital zoom. And then if I push on it for a long time, it's going to enable or disable the film simulation recipes, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But again, I can keep going, and then in addition to the function buttons, we also have touch functions that we can assign. So for now, it is set to off, but I could go in and then add a feature to that swipe left, right, up, and down. So the X-E5 brings with it this new film simulation dial and the little window up here, which looks fantastic if you ask me. So by turning the film simulation dial, we can obviously change the film simulation, and then at the back we can see this neat little animation with the canister that's going to change and then show us which film simulation we're using. And then if I press on the Q button, it will give me information about the said film simulation. Now, as you might have seen, we went by some FS positions, so film simulation 1, 2, and 3. So those are the customizable options. So as you can think, having so many film simulations that are all great, we can't possibly fit them all onto that film simulation dial. So if you go into the menu, you can go in and then assign film simulations to those FS 1, 2, and 3 positions that might not be on the film simulation dial, or you could assign one that is on the film simulation dial, but you want to have a film recipe assigned to it. So first, let's just go and see how we can assign a film simulation to the FS3 position. So we go into the menu, and then we can go into the image quality setting menu, and then we go to the film simulation dial setting, and then we can see we have our 3 positions as well as the acros. Now you might wonder why acros is there. The reason being that we have 4 options for acros. So we can have it standard, or we can have it simulating a yellow filter on the lens, a red filter, or a green filter. Now, if you're not familiar with what they do, and then honestly, off the top of my head, I can't tell you which does what exactly, but it's great because it can tell us a little bit more about it. So for green, it produces pleasing skin tones in portraits. With the red, it enhances contrast and darkens the skies considerably. And then the yellow, slightly enhanced contrast and darken the sky. So if I wanted to have it with a red filter on, and then I can assign it to acros, and then if I go to my acros position, I can see that I have acros plus red filter. All right, now let's get back to what I was originally going to. So we said FS3, we want to customize the film simulation that goes on. So as mentioned, we can choose the film simulation. So we could choose one that is not on there, but like I said, we can choose one that is already there. So let's take Reala Ace. Now Reala Ace is there, and then you can see underneath we have film recipe, and then it's set to off. Now I can go and create a recipe for this FS3 position. So I'm just going to click on, and then this will allow me to go in and dial in the settings I want for my film simulation recipe. So I'm going to add some grain, and let's go bold. So strong and then large. Let's have the color chrome effects blue set to weak. And then our white balance, we want to set it to fluorescent 3, yeah. And then I'm going to shift it to red. Dynamic range, let's set to 400. And then my tone curve, I want it to be, again, kind of bold. So highlights is going to be at +2. And then the shadow, I'm just going to crush them at +4. Color should stay like that. Sharpness is fine. And yeah, clarity is fine. So that's what I want for my recipe. All right. So now film simulation recipe is set to on. So when I get to FS3, so you can see now I'm on Acros, and then I'm going to go to my FS3. I should go this way. And then you can see Reala Ace is very, very purplish, which is definitely not what it would look like, but it brings in those special settings that I've dialed in because the film recipe is set to on. Now, if I wanted it to simply bring up the film simulation I've selected, as we talked about before, with that lever, I can push on it for a couple seconds, and then it's going to turn off the film recipe. So it's simply going to bring up Reala Ace in that case, which obviously we have a dedicated position for it. But if you had, you know, Pro Negative, which is not on this film simulation dial, then you could access it this way and then not have a special recipe. And then if you want to turn it back on, you simply push again on that lever, and then you have your film recipe on. Now, if you want to quickly play around with your image and then send it over to your phone, but you wanted to tweak a couple of things onto your image, you could do so because Fujifilm cameras all have a built-in RAW converter. So if I go into my playback menu and then I look at this image right here, I can press on the Q button to have a quick access to the RAW conversion menu. And then from there, I can go and play around with my settings. So I can push and pull my exposure. I can change my film simulation. So let's say I wanted it to be in Acros instead, and with the red filter. And then I wanted to have some grain on it. And the white balance, I wanted to have it something weird. Let's do the incandescent, which is going to look very strange. And then tone curve, let's, you know, push them and then crush those blacks. Right, and then I'm going to hit the Q button to create. Now that's good, but let's say I wanted to overexpose it a little bit more, so I'm going to press on the display back button to cancel. Now the great thing is that everything I've just done stays there, so I can go and only change what I want to change. So what I wanted to make it brighter, so I wanted to push it to +2. Now I'm going to hit the Q button again, and then this looks terrible, but let's say that's what I wanted. I can push OK, and then it's going to save a JPEG for me, which at that point I can go on and then send to my phone and then share it on socials, or just have it for later so that it's done and ready to go. Now the Fujifilm X-E5 does great video, and there's a couple of things that personally I like to set when I'm starting to shoot some videos. So I'm going to walk you through them. So first of all, you know, I can press on my drive button and then push up with the joystick once so that I can quickly get into the movie mode. Now let's go into the menus and set up the things that I need to set up to have, good quality video in optimal settings to my taste. So let's go into the menu, and then I will go into the movie setting list. Now first I'm going to choose my resolution. So the X-E5 can shoot up to 6.2K video, which is pretty impressive. So I'm going to set it to 6.2K. I like to shoot at 23.98 to have that cinematic look, so I'm going to leave it at that. Now let's go to the media recording settings. So I want to record to SD card. I want H.265, that's my preferred codec, but I want 422 10-bit to get the maximum amount of colors and details recorded. And then the bit rate also is going to dictate the amount of details I can capture and then transfer over. So 200 megabits per second is the maximum, and that's usually where I like to be at. But you can definitely, if you wanted to share on social, send it to your phone quickly. We have some low bitrate option, which are great. Again, for those purposes, if you're on location, you want to send it straight to your phone and then upload it to socials, that's going to be a great option. But for video edits, personally, I like to have the maximum quality I can, so I'm going to set it to 200 megabits per second. And then here we can choose whether we want to record with the film simulation, if we want to record with log, and then the X-E5 features F-Log2, which is going to give us great dynamic range, but requires some post-processing, so you have to keep that in mind if you wanted to do that. You have HLG, so hybrid log gamma, so to be displayed on HDR displays. Again, personally, I really like the look right out the camera from our film simulation, so I love to shoot in ProVia or Reala Ace, and then after that, since it's kind of natural looking, I can go and push a little bit if I wanted the colors certain ways, but it really is my preferred method. And then the X-E5 can also shoot in RAW, so if we wanted to output to a recorder, we could do ProRes RAW as well as Blackmagic RAW. And then at that point, if you go in, you can select your resolution, so up to 6.2K, and then your frame rate can be up to 29.97, and then you can obviously have your cinematic 23.98. But we're not going to do that, so we are going to leave it set to off. So those are good to go. And then you have your high-speed recording options. So if I go on, I can choose whether I want full HD in 16:9 or DCI, so 17:9. And then I can choose the frames per second, so 240, which is going to give me a 8 times slow motion if I was shooting at 29.97. But, we like that cinematic look, so it would be more of a 23.98, which will give me a 10 times slow motion. Now we can go slower, so 4 times or 5 times or 8 times. Now these are going to be changing your output. So some are specific to 50 and 25, which is more of a European standard. But then here in Canada, we like to use the 29.97 or the 23.98, so that will be our 240 or 120 FPS. But for now, we're going to leave it to off. We have the option to have a self timer, so if you are to record yourself like I am doing right now, for example, you could set a 10-second timer, a 5-second, or 3-second, and one of the great things also with the FUJIFILM X-E5 is that if I set a timer for it and I'm going to film myself, I also have the ability to have a front-looking screen. So if I look at the camera, you can see the countdown is happening right now, and then it starts recording. And then that brings me to the red frame indicator, which is a neat feature to have as well. So we can enable or disable it. Again, that's going to be in the menu. So let's go back. And then we have on the third page the record frame indicator, so we can turn it on or off. So as you saw, it is red when you're recording normally, but if you are shooting in high-speed video, that frame will be more of a turquoise, blue, green borders to indicate that you are recording in high speed, because when you are doing high speed recording, there'll be no sound, which if you were talking to the camera would be a shame for you to talk and have no audio coming in. Then we have the tally lights. So personally, I think it's something that's very useful in general, to be able to see that the camera is actually recording. The camera I'm looking at right now has that same tally light, and then I can make sure that the camera's rolling, and then again that I'm talking and things are being recorded, which is a great thing when you're creating content. So you can choose whether you have a lot of options. Let's not go through all of them, but you can have a front and rear light. You can have it solid or blinking. So let's just do, to show you an example, the front and the back solid. So let's record something. We have the timer on, and then you can see here we have our tally light, which again is something very, very useful to make sure that you are recording. Now let's go into the autofocus options. So first thing I really urge you to set up is go into the AF mode and then set it to area, so that it will use the box that you position on the screen to focus. And you can also make it bigger or smaller, which is something great. Now for video, I would suggest having it a little bit bigger so that you can put it on your subject. But if you are recording yourself, like I'm doing right now, I really, really suggest that you enable the face and eye detection. And then in my case, I like to set the face and eye detection to the right eye priority. So it's always focusing on the right eye. It's not jumping in between trying to make sure which one is closest to the lens. It's really focusing on that right eye, which is my personal advice to you. It could be left if you want it, but I prefer to put it to the right eye. And in that case, again, if you're recording yourself, make sure that you have the camera set to continuous autofocus so that it will continuously focus as you are moving back and forth. And that pretty much sums up all of my settings for recording video with the Fujifilm X-E5. Now to connect the Fujifilm X-E5 to the XApp, which is great companion to your camera because you can transfer images, you can use it to geotag your images, which is great. We can pair it to the app. We have a dedicated button underneath the camera, so the Bluetooth button right here. So if we hold it for about 2 seconds, it's going to bring up the Bluetooth menu, and then I can go into pairing. First, I want to make sure that my Bluetooth is enabled. I can go to pairing, and then on my phone, I can go in, and then on my phone, I can go in and tap on that add camera button, and then they're going to talk to each other. And my phone just found the X-E5. I can click on register. Now I always like to sync the time and date with my phone. So on the camera, it asks you if you want to do it. You simply press on OK. And then at that point, we are connected. And then you can see that I have the location turned on. Now if you wanted to disable that, you could do so. So go into the menu of the camera and then go to the network USB setting. You go to Bluetooth smartphone setting. And then you can choose whether you want to have your smartphone location synchronized or not. I personally love to do that just because, looking back on the map, I really enjoy having all my photos grouped by, countries and cities and things like that. It's just something that I enjoy. But if you wanted to disable that, you could do so right there in the menu. So now I am paired with the XApp on my phone. Now I do want to mention something. So if you do end up pairing your X-E5 or any of your Fujifilm compatible camera with the XApp. And then you go and then pair it with an iPad, and then you pair it with a different phone, and then so on. In order for the phone or the camera to talk to each other, they need to know who they want to talk to. So if I go into the menu, you can go into, again, the network USB setting, into the Bluetooth and smartphone setting, and then you can see the pairing destination. So you can see right here I have two connections. So my current phone, which is connected right now, and then an other phone, which I'm not sure which one it is, but if I was trying to connect again with that other phone, it wouldn't work because the camera would be looking for this specific phone. So if it doesn't connect, just make sure you have the right phone or tablet or something registered into the camera, because if I turn on the camera right now, it will be looking for this phone specifically. Even if the other phone is turned on and ready, it will not detect it. I would need to go in and then select this other phone, and then you can see now I am disconnected and it won't work. So make sure you look for that. So in the app, you can do a couple of things. Obviously, you can sync location, time. You can get images from the camera to your phone. You can remotely shoot. You have a remote control, so Bluetooth trigger. So if I click on that, shooting a photo, you can back up and restore settings. So this is something very useful if you have to send in your camera for repair, or if you loan your camera to someone. Before you do that, you can simply go and hit backup and restore, and then you can back up your settings. You can give it a name. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And then you have a backup of all of your settings right into your phone. So if you wanted to restore the settings before your dad played with your camera and change all of your settings, you can simply go into the app and then press on that backup you made. You can restore, and then you can see all the settings are being restored. So this is a very neat feature from the XApp. Now, before we end up with this section of the video, let's just transfer an image. So by pressing on get, you can see that the camera becomes emitting Wi-Fi, and then the phone will find it, and then I can join. Now there will be a connection between the two, and then it will allow me to select images from the camera. And then you can see I have my videos, my images, and let's take this one that I edited before. So you can choose whether you want to resize it to 3 megapixel or not. I like to, because I'm going to be sharing it on socials anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I don't need that extra resolution. And then you can also transfer raw images as well, which is great in that sense. But for right now, I just want to get that single image, and let's just get the original as well. I can just press on get. It's going to start transferring, and then my images are stored into my camera roll. Now, another neat feature is the ability to print directly to a compatible Instax link printer. So how we go about pairing it: first, we're going to be pressing on that Bluetooth button again for a couple seconds. We're going to hit that pairing button, and then we can turn on our link wide printer. And there you can see we have our link wide printer connected. And then now on the back of the screen, we can see that the Instax printer is connected to the camera via Bluetooth. And then if I go into my playback mode and then I choose this photo, for instance, I can press on menu OK. And then if I go down to the second page, I can go and then choose Instax printer print. Now, before I go there, you can choose the quality mode. So we have the Instax Rich mode, which will give us more vivid colors, or the natural mode, which is going to be more of a neutral a lower contrast kind of mode. I personally prefer the natural mode, so I'm going to set it to that. And then I'm going to go to Instax printer print. And then I have my photo right here. And then again, at that point, I can go and change, you know, between the various images. So I'm going to go and choose this one. So I click on set. It gives me a preview. And then at this point, I can go and send it to the printer. Now this is using Bluetooth, so it's going to take a second. But let's have it transfer over. So here we go. We have our image coming out of the printer. Now let's put it here and have it process. All right, so this will be it for this how-to on the FUJIFILM X-E5. Now, if you'd like to know more about this and other Fujifilm products, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Until next time, c'était Francis pour les Fuji Guys.